Alrighty, folks. I'm going to talk a little bit about Unit 4, Lesson 2, Coding Activity Number 1. Just like with the other activity, let's start out by reading the prompt and make sure that we're okay with the behavior of this program. Ask the user for two numbers. Print only the even numbers between them. You should also print the two numbers if they are even. I've started with the following code, which a number of you have kind of told me you figured out already. We create a scanner, we write enter two numbers, and I'm going to write min and max to represent the two numbers that come in. This is where it gets hard from here. Remember the questions that we ask ourselves. Do we need a while loop? What does it check for? Is there an if statement? And what should it do if there is an if statement? On the surface, I think there's a lot of different ways to think about this problem. It's just printing off the numbers that occur between the minimum and a maximum. But I want to argue with you that using a while loop is the easiest way to think of this problem. Let's think about why. Do we need a while loop here? If we have one, what might we use it for? Pause the video and think to yourself. If we had a while loop, what might we actually use it for? I think that the easiest way to think about this problem is that we have a minimum and a max. Maybe the while loop could help us actually loop through the numbers. And maybe we only print them out if they're even, which says print only the even numbers between them. That seems like something our if statement could do. And what the if statement does, if it's called, feels pretty straightforward. It prints the number. So if our code can loop through the numbers, check if they're even, and print the number, that's going to get you to a place where you can put all of these out. Here's what I think the challenging question is, and where a lot of people got caught up. What does it look like to print through numbers with a while loop? How can we actually use it to do that? This is a little bit of a hint that's going to be helpful going forward to here to our next unit. Looping through numbers is essentially the art of counting. It's the art of counting, in this case, from the min to the max. We said we're going to count from the min to the max and print out the even numbers. I have a minimum. I want it to count up to the maximum. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put min plus plus inside of my while loop. Remind yourself what min plus plus means real quick if you forget. It adds 1 to the value. It adds 1 to the value of the variable. So we're going to use this min value to check and see, or as kind of our placeholder of numbers that we're counting through. If you were to put in 3 for min, the first time through the while loop would have min is 3. It adds 1 and runs again. Min is 4. It adds 1 and runs again. Min is 5. By putting it inside of our while loop, we can check and see. Or we can make sure that we're actually counting up on it. Now the question is, if I'm counting from a minimum to a maximum number, when should it keep going? And when should it stop? If I'm updating the value of min in the while loop, I'm probably going to want to do something with min up here. But I'm checking something. It's a Boolean statement. And I want it to loop through to my max. So the question is, when do we want this in the while loop to be true? What condition do we want to be true for us to keep going if we're going to keep looping through the numbers? Think about it to yourself for a moment. We want it to loop from the min to the max. So if we're adding from the minimum, 1 each time, if I want it to stop at my max, and as the code says, print the 2 numbers if they are even, it should check if the max is even too. I'm going to need to put less than or equal to, so that it checks this value and prints it off, even when it's equal to the maximum. This is the basic formula for a counting program. Start at my minimum, add 1 each time through the while loop, stop when I get to a particular value that's being read in. Next, we said I needed to check if it's even, and if it was, print out the value. So just pause and make sure you understand this line of code real quick. Within our while loop, I created an even value or within our while loop, I'm creating an if statement that checks if the value is even. And at the end, I'm going to print whatever number holds true in this particular iteration of the while loop. And I put a little quotation, space quotation, because it's a way to add spaces between all of them while keeping it in the same line. One more thing I'll want to fix, I'm just going to put system.out.print instead of system.out.println here, so that it adds them all up on the same line. Now here's where it gets hard. What tool do we have to check if a number is even? What tool do we have to check if a number is even? Think to yourself for a minute. Pause the video if you need to think about it, and then take a look back. I'm going to argue that the modulus can tell us if a number is even, and this is actually a problem you did earlier this year. How could we use the modulus to tell if a number is even? If we modulus a number by 2, and it's even, it's always going to be equal to 0, because even numbers are perfectly divisible by 2. I'll say that one more time, and I'll put a comment. if we modulus an even number by 2, it'll always be 0 because even numbers are divisible by 2. What will odd numbers produce if we modulus something by 2? An odd number will always produce the number modulus by 2 is equal to 1, because there always is a remainder if you divide an odd number by 2. This is it. You can write this whole thing after you take the inputs in 4 lines of code. We have a condition up here that's checking, one that's adding to the numbers to help it count, and each time that it loops through a new number, it checks if it's even, and it prints out the value. I think the hard part is thinking about how to put all of this together. You really have to sit and think, how is my while behaving in a way that goes beyond the fact that we've just been reading them in class. In fact, I know that if I gave you this program in class, you'd be able to make me a table that identifies its behavior. But it gets a little bit trickier when we have to code it for ourselves. The modulus is the key to understanding whether a number is divisible by something. And I would pay close attention to it in the future. If you have questions or want to talk through either of these solutions, feel free to drop by my office hours. I know I worked through this at a pretty step-by-step pace, so thank you for those of you who were patient. I hope you have found value in reviewing these solutions. We're going to keep working at it. We're going to keep trying to program and figure things out on our own. And I appreciate how hard y'all are working on this. If you want to see a little demonstration of my code, we can throw it in real quick and see if it actually throws any errors. It looks like it's okay for the time being. Email me with questions and let me know what I can do to support you. Stay awesome, folks.